Season has gotten to its second or third month, really second month. Georgia taking on Vanderbilt this week, and after beating Tennessee by 3 in Athens, the Vols playing well at the end of the fourth quarter and playing well at the end of the second to certainly give an upset bid shot at Georgia. But for the fifth season in a row, the Vols lose to Georgia. Tennessee seems improved, but now it's time for them to turn the corner and start beating people. Georgia, will play Vanderbilt this week. Vanderbilt's pretty bad, and I think that the big thing for me is how much are we going to see backup quarterback Bryce Ramsey? How much are we going to see of Todd Gurley this week, if much at all? Vanderbilt is pretty bad. Let me roll off some statistics for you here. With Vanderbilt, they are the worst offensive team in the SEC. They've ranked 14th in every offensive category. They also rank 14th in defensive scoring, 12th in total defense, 10th in passing, and 11th in rushing. So those are all pretty bad. As far as Georgia's concerned, they are their worst case scenario. They are 13th in passing, which is why Hudson Mason's getting some heat. They are 9th in total offense, 2nd in rushing offense, and 2nd in scoring. Georgia's still scoring at a pretty crazy pace. The Dogs are 4th in rushing defense in the SEC, 8th in passing defense, 6th in total defense, and 9th in scoring defense. So you'd like to see the scoring defense get a little bit better. There's not tons and tons to complain about, but Georgia's still averaging 45 points a game. I think they could certainly get over that this weekend. Vanderbilt's allowing 35 points a game, and most of those games were at home. So we'll see. I think Vanderbilt's played one road game. They didn't score on offense, so they're pretty bad. They're only averaging about 106 yards a game rushing, pretty bad, and they're allowing 161 in run defense. So that's actually one of their better statistical categories, and it's good enough for 11th best in a 14th team conference. So this should be the most lopsided game Georgia plays for some time. And I think if you go back and you look at statistics, people say statistics are for losers. That's I get that argument, but the better teams in the SEC do have the better statistics. I mean, if you look at Alabama, they are 5th in scoring offense, 3rd in scoring defense. If you look at Auburn, 4th in scoring offense, 6th in scoring defense. Georgia, 2nd in scoring offense, 9th in scoring defense. Mississippi State, 7th in scoring offense, 7th in scoring defense. And then Ole Miss is 9th in scoring offense, which is probably going to kill them, and 1st in scoring defense. A&M, number 1 scoring offense, number 4 scoring defense. So statistically, A&M does look like the best team, them or Alabama in the conference. But if you just watch on the field, A&M hadn't looked great here lately. The sort of issue of the week in Athens is, how much is Bryce Ramsey going to play? And that's a good question. I think, I'll say what I've been saying to a lot of people here, which I think is that in my mind, I think Bryce is going to play probably the third series of the game or the last series of the first quarter, something like that. He'll play in the first half. I think when we see him get out there, it's definitely a different offense. They can score passing the ball. He has the longest pass of the season, which was at 39-yarder out there to Chris Conley against Troy. But it's not, he hasn't earned the starting position, okay? So there's no controversy. It's just that he's going to play. And could there be a controversy? Yeah, sure, eventually. But right now, that's not where we're at. The other big news, and this is really a bigger deal than Bryce Ramsey, is the return of Malcolm Mitchell and Justice Scott Wesley. Georgia's been without those two players for the bulk of these last 2 years, and or the bulk of these 2 seasons, and that's asking too much. I mean, I think you got Rhett McGowan as one of your major receivers last year. You don't want that. And right now, Georgia's just struggling. Period. in the passing game. We're talking about Georgia struggling in the passing game. It's something that they do very well under Mike Bobo. So I think that the return of Justin and Malcolm will be something that you certainly would imagine would help Georgia. But, I had one guy on the inside say to me, yeah, that's if they're the same as they have been. And they said, I don't know if they are. And I think that's a good question. I mean, what is this group going to look like out there? And are Malcolm and Justin ready to become something close to what they were in the past? I would say they probably are not going to be that, but they may be something better than Georgia's got. So it's all about calibrating expectations right this second. It does look, though, if you are honest with yourself, it does look like Bryce Ramsey, even with the receivers Georgia's got right now, there's a certain pace to the offense that's not there when Hudson's in the game. For whatever reason, no favorites here. Get to the question. Swanee Dog 03, who seems to ask something every single week, says, do you still feel like we will be the ones in Atlanta the first week in December? If Georgia keeps having more dismissals, can Georgia add more? Well, let me get the first question first. I do still think they're going to wind up in Atlanta. South Carolina's pretty bad. I've said that for some time here. And that they upset Georgia is the only thing that's keeping their season going in any way. They're 2-2 in the conference. They still have to play Tennessee, at Auburn, which they'll probably lose for certain, at Kentucky, which is a tricky one, and then at Florida. So they are not going to go through the season with they're going to have at least one more loss. Georgia's season comes down to Missouri. They have to beat Missouri out there, and I think that's a very winnable game. Very winnable game. That's a game they should win. So, I think they're the favorite to get to Atlanta still. I don't think that's changed. That Florida is the least of Georgia's concerns should tell you all you need to know. And that's that this East is not as good as it's been in years gone by. Certainly not as good as it was in, say, 2012 or 2009 or whenever. It's just not. And so that Georgia is one of the better teams, in the country, globally, and they're in one of the worst divisions. One of the worst divisions is kind of harsh because you look at the ACC and both those divisions are bad. You look at, the Big Ten is horrible, period. So everybody's comparing the East to the West, and yes, there's no question the West is better than the East, but, no one was apologizing to the East when it was all loaded up for the first 12 years of this conference's split. I do think Georgia gets back to Atlanta. Swanee Dog again. If Georgia keeps having more dismissals, can Georgia add to the 2015 class, or is that number somewhat fixed? The dismissals, talking about Sheldon Dawson leaving the team, that number is going to be 30. 29, 31, 30, just call it 30, something like that. The dismissals don't really change that, I don't think, for this season because you can sign the 25, but in order to get to the 30 or 31, whatever the number is, you got to get early guys in. And for guys like Sheldon Dawson leaving early, that would affect probably, in my mind, that early number more than it would the total number. And the early number versus the 25 number. So they're going to have to continue to recruit. I do not think that Sheldon Dawson leaving makes a huge difference in the recruiting. Maybe you roll the dice and get a Brendan Douglas or a J.J. Green who you don't think is going to do anything and then winds up playing some. But that number, I think, is going to be 30, just right on that ballpark. The Boy Racer, 45. Are you surprised at the lack of defense improvement over the first 4 games of the season? Georgia's given up 24, 38, 32 points to the 3 decent teams they played, and 2 of those games were at home. I knew Georgia wasn't going to be a top 15 defense, but I also thought we'd be a lot better than this. I actually think they have gotten better defensively. But sometimes people disagree with me in the grand scheme of things, which I don't have a problem with. I get that. Sometimes I have to educate. Um, Scoring defense, Georgia's allowing 22 points a game. Uh, Pass defense, rush defense, they're allowing 100 a game. Not that bad. The issue is the pass defense, and it's really not that bad. Um, Teams are going more than 50%, about 60% against Georgia, and they're hitting about 6.5 yards of completion. Scored 7 touchdowns on the Dogs. But they're only allowing about 231 points a game. That means 231 yards a game. That means they're allowing about 340 yards a game. Now, that's pretty good, actually, considering the schedule Georgia's played. If you look at all the teams in the SEC, very few of them have played 3 legitimate, what I would call legitimate games. LSU has played Wisconsin, and they played Mississippi State. Ole Miss has played nobody. Kentucky has played Florida. Alabama has played Florida, I guess. Maybe West Virginia. Tennessee's played Georgia and Oklahoma. We sort of know what Tennessee is. A&M has played South Carolina, and they've played Arkansas. Auburn's played K-State and Arkansas. Georgia's played Clemson, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and South Carolina. All those are legitimate opponents. Missouri's played South Carolina. Vanderbilt's played Ole Miss and South Carolina, but Vanderbilt's bad. Arkansas has played Auburn, Texas Tech, and A&M. So I think we know sort of what Georgia is and what Arkansas is. Carolina has played Texas A&M, Missouri, and Georgia. We know what they are. And so, see, some of the teams I'm saying we know what they are, they've got 2 losses in the conference already. And so that's a real concern if you're them. But I think the Georgia defense has improved from game 1. And all improvement is not linear. In other words, it's not a straight line one way or the other, up or down. You can go forward in some aspects and go backwards in another. In the Clemson game, Georgia's defense really did play pretty well at home, I felt like. But the offense had controlled the ball so much in the second half. That's what forced all those 3-and-outs. Here's why I think they've improved. If you look at South Carolina, that game, they had 1 turnover. It set them up, Georgia, to win the game. But that's basically what the defense did. Other than that, South Carolina pretty much did what they wanted to do. Against Tennessee, Georgia, Hudson Mason had 2 turnovers. They allowed 0 points in that time. They also scored a touchdown. Those things right there win you games. If you can stop the other team from scoring on turnovers, and if you can score defensively on a turnover, you're going to win probably 95% of the games that you play in, if not 99. So that's why I think they played better. If you look on the field, they're playing a little bit better. I mean, the critique really is the secondary playing better. And, you know, Clemson couldn't really figure out how to throw against Georgia except one drive, I feel like, which was, early in the game. These other teams have a little bit more firepower in the passing game. And the other thing is, Tennessee threw it. I think they threw it 40 times. They threw it 44 times. The Vols were 27 of 44 and could only get 284 yards in the passing game. That's not a great per attempt percentage there. 6.4 yards attempt. Now, when they connected, it was about 10 yards of connection. So that's pretty good. But, it's not what you want. Georgia was right in that same ballpark by yards per attempt. So Tennessee threw it a ton. And didn't really capitalize when they did. And that was because of Georgia's defense. I thought they played. I thought They have gotten better. And I think that but it's not always linear. In other words, you don't always get better one week. In week 3 may be a step backwards from week 2, but week 4 may be better than both. That's what I'm saying. And I do think that they have gotten better. They're not to the degree. They're never. This secondary is never going to be great. I think that's just what you need to understand. But I don't think it's asking too much to say, hey, can these guys get better? I think they've gotten better, but it may be tough to see sometimes. But they seem to be sticking with the receivers a little bit better. But they're still, I mean, all of the cussing of Todd Grantham last year is still the players. I mean, it's always the players. You've got to have the players, and you can coach them up all you want to, and that's fine. But you do need experience and kids to play. As a follow-up, what has happened to Leonard Floyd? He looked like a first-rounder against Clemson. Has basically been non-existent since. Is he injured? He's not injured that I'm aware of. I mean, I think Leonard. I'm trying to think. I mean, Jordan's played better. That's part of it. Who's getting to the quarterback quicker between him and Jordan? Jordan's played a little bit better. I mean, I think Leonard. There's nothing wrong with Leonard Floyd. It just, he's rushing. I think Leonard's rushing from the middle in that third down blitz set that Georgia uses, and maybe that's not as effective. And it's also possible that people are concerned more with him and they're double teaming him, etc. I mean, I still think he's a first rounder myself, but we'll see. Lastly, are you surprised that Mason has struggled as much as he has this season? I know we have been without 2 of our more explosive guys to start the year, but they weren't there for Taker, Nebraska at the end of the season, and he played fairly well. It's strange to see Rick Bobo offense can't even throw for 200 yards. Well, that's true, but he did have Artie Lynch and Rantavius Wooten, and Wooten could get down the field a little bit. So, and I mean, it sounds crazy, but even have Rhett McGowan, who was dependable at least. Those guys are gone. The tight ends have just not been great so far. I'm surprised he's struggled a little bit, but I felt like this was what we were going to see a lot of. And I think that Hudson's limited in the passing game. But I think I think the jury's out a little bit on him just because we need to see what he's like with his guys. We'll see. Who takes Sony's Hardcore Bubba? Who takes Sony's spot on special teams? That is a major problem. I don't think there is anybody. I don't know the answer to that. And talking about being the gunner, I mean, that's something he's really done well, Sony. That's probably been the most, in my mind, that's been the most team-centric thing he's helped with. That's really helped them. And he continues, well, McKenzie getting the carries at halfback, tailback, whatever. Nah, probably not, because maybe 1 or 2, but you got to be happy with Brendan Douglas, Todd Gurley, and Nick Chubb as your running backs. You're okay with that. I don't think, you can get some gadget plays in there, but I don't think he's going to get a ton. Dixie Doggo 2, who left on the schedule has an offensive line at the same level as South Carolina's. Take me out of what looks like a 7-5 or 8-4 season that looks like we are headed towards 7-5. That would mean they would lose to Auburn, Missouri, Arkansas, and Florida. No, that's not going to happen. 8-4. I don't see that either. I mean, I think they lose 1 more game this season, maybe 2, but not 3 more. I mean, you're talking about they'd lose to Tech at home, Auburn at home. That's certainly possible. Missouri on the road, possible, but not probable. Arkansas on the road, possible. Florida down there. I don't see Florida beating Georgia. I just who on the schedule has the same offensive line as Carolina. I mean, they were supposed to be one of the best offensive lines out there, so probably A&M, but they're not on the schedule. So talk you out of the 7-5, 8-4. Y'all got to start understanding that wins over Tennessee are never losses. Waits 24. Dino, want an opinion by someone who has seen these kids practice and go through drills. Does Georgia have any other inside linebackers with better speed than Wilson and Herrera? They seem to have a hard time covering everybody. If we have faster inside linebackers, all the subs Pruitt likes to get it. Herrera and Ramik are getting abused over the field. Yeah, because they're inside linebackers. I mean, that's what happens, unfortunately. And everybody's not Alec Ogletree and Christian Robinson who can run like deer for linebackers. I mean, that's the issue with an inside linebacker. That's why everybody thinks Spurrier always does stuff, deep down the field and all that. No, they're picking on guys. They're picking on linebackers. Middle linebackers always have issues in the passing game. They just got to be good enough to deal with linebackers and so forth. They're not going to match up with, no linebacker is going to be able to stop Chris Conley or Michael Bennett or somebody like that from running across their face. They just can't. You can't stop it. You're talking about like somebody like me trying to run down Todd Gurley in terms of speed game. It's not going to happen. That's not the point. The point of an inside linebacker is not in coverage. Now, in the NFL, yeah, that's different. But that's where guys like Ogletree play. It's not the same. So the question, though, is does Georgia have any better inside linebackers in terms of speed? Well, Tim Kimbrough, yes. But you can't just call a timeout in the middle of the play and say, oh, we want Kimbrough out there right now because they're obviously going to throw it. We didn't know they were going to throw it, but we're going to stick Kimbrough in there right now. Because I think if you want tackles, Herrera and Wilson are your guys. And they're pretty good, they're pretty good linebackers. If you're saying, they're getting, I think the premise of the question is incorrect. I think you're assuming that inside linebackers can really cover in this league, and they just can't. And that's why people are scoring 40 points a game all the time. It's because they're throwing this little nickel and dime stuff, right in front of the linebackers, and they can't catch it, or they're making the linebackers turn and run, and they can't do that either. Because the guys on offense right now, frankly, are better than the guys on defense in this conference. They just are. UGA Dog Forever 08 asks, how many reps do you see Mitchell and just Scott Wesley getting their first week? They're going to play. They're going to play. If the offense is out there, I think they play 40, 50% of the snaps. Yes. Trooper Dog 980. Do you think that the number of defensive backs Georgia's rolling in and out could actually working to our detriment? In my opinion, what a quarterback needs with his receivers and secondary needs to achieve some type of cohesiveness to be successful. Obviously, it seems Georgia's failing miserably in both areas. At some point, it would seem the staff would distinguish who to start and who to. Well, you would think that, but they basically are having tryouts during the season, and Georgia's had 3 different secondaries for 3 different years. 2012, you had the old timers. They had been there. They had started for 3 years. Last year, you had the knuckleheads. Well, all the knuckleheads are gone. So now you have the new kids, the young kids. So there is no cohesiveness because those guys are just basically starting to play again. The only person who played in all 3 of those seasons is Damian Swan, who was a heck of a player when he was younger, and now he's older and he's playing with younger kids, and he just doesn't look as good. That's it. In your honest opinion, does Hudson Mason have some sort of arm ailment? I don't think he does. A lot of people do. I don't, and I have not heard that from someone with any sort of knowledge. So I don't think so. Danger Ranger 69-69. Would you say Hudson Mason is closer to David Green in terms of being a game manager? David didn't have much of an arm necessarily either. David had a great defense helping him the whole time. I don't think the two are comparable because I think David's a better quarterback, and even though his arm strength was limited, he had some go-getters, and Hudson's getting those guys now. But David had that, and he had a defense. They were winning games that were tight, and they weren't scoring 40 points a game, Georgia at the time. Did the coaches trust Hudson to read the defense and make his own audible? Yes, that's standard Georgia quarterback. Do you think it's bad luck against Tennessee over the years with all the injuries, or did they play dirty? I do not think they played dirty. I think what happened at Tennessee up there last year was just completely crazy. It will never happen again. With a new president at Georgia, do you see a chance that Georgia may change its discipline procedure to reflect others in the SEC? They are not going to change. they may want the SEC to come towards them. They are not going to change. And 5, is there any chance Georgia plays at the Dome in Atlanta next year to start the season off? I've not heard that, but you don't ever know. I mean, you don't ever know. I think if it's Georgia, you gotta chill out with all these games. I mean, you don't have to play 10 competitive games each season because everybody else isn't doing it. And why are you playing Clemson when nobody else is? So I don't think they have to. But you could get a Penn State Georgia at the Dome. You could get a Florida State Georgia at the Dome. There's any number of teams that could. You could get Arizona State Georgia at the Dome, or SC try to come in from Los Angeles. I mean, you don't know. It's got to be someone that makes sense. I mean, maybe Ohio State would want to come down, but Georgia does need to use the Dome a little bit more. But I don't know. I think playing at Sanford Stadium, they're very good there. They're good at the Dome, but you want to play at your home stadium because it's recruiting and there's all sorts of advantages to having 7 home games a year, which is the most Georgia really ever has. HP Dog, last question. Dean, can you give us your opinion on why the tight ends have basically been non-existent so far? I see Zeb flanked out wide a lot, but he never seems to get the ball. Is Rome struggling, or do you think Hudson needs to focus more on looking for them? They don't trust. I mean, Hudson doesn't trust them because they're not that great right now. I mean, it's that easy, and that's what's going on. Is guys that are the receivers, as mediocre as Hudson played against Tennessee, mediocre to bad. You've got to have better trust, and in order to have better trust, guys got to do what's supposed to happen. Otherwise, you won't trust them. And it's that simple. And Hudson won't throw them the ball. On the interception that he threw towards Bennett, yes, he should have hit Jay. Jay was right wide open. And again, the middle linebackers couldn't cover him. But he just sat down in the zone. That's an easy throw. The other throw was to Chris. That was a bad throw. That wasn't a bad decision. That was a bad throw. He underthrew it. And maybe that's what Hudson feels the most comfortable doing is underthrowing it, having guys back shoulder. But you can't do that the whole time. So he does. He has to get the ball out there. But he does not, I'm telling you right now, he does not trust the guys that he's playing with out there right now, those receivers. And maybe that's why he's so eager to get Malcolm and Justin out there, is so that the hierarchy of who's getting onto the field are guys that he actually knows. He knows Jay Rome. He knows, let's put it this way, instead of 4 of the top 6 receivers being true freshmen, it may be that 2 of the top 6, and then you can live with that. That's something you can deal with. But he's thrown the ball to Justin, Malcolm, etc. for years. He doesn't know Sony. He doesn't know Isaiah. He doesn't know Nick Chubb. Not really. Not like he knows these other guys. But the reality is this: he's got to play better. Hudson has got to play better if Georgia's going to get to Atlanta. I expect him to, but I also expect to see Bryce Ramsey play, and I think that's the right call. Okay, Dean Legge's show for the week of Georgia's game with Vanderbilt.